Who is Trump's Supreme Court pick? Hey guys, this is Double D from the Entitled Millennials podcast, and this is my Thinking Out Loud series. As you know, RBG died about this time last month, and no sooner had they shoveled in the last scoop of dirt on top of her coffin, Trump had already picked a nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, we've already heard a lot about the Supreme Court pick in the news, what with the appointment hearings going on. Trump's pick, and Amy Coney Barrett, is a circuit judge for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. She is what is known as a constitutional originalist, or you might call it a constitutional fundamentalist. Now, this is the first thing that we need to understand about her in order to sort of speculate on the sort of ruling she may do in the future. Because we can go ahead and assume, with the way that the Senate's stacked and how weak the Democrats are and how much they have already pushed through Trump's U.S. appeal court judge picks, we can go ahead and assume that Amy Coney Barrett is going to get a seat on the Supreme Court of the United States. So, in order to sort of speculate, and I'm sure a lot of you already watch the channel already kind of know the sort of rulings she's going to do, but in order for us to speculate, we need to sort of understand what her thought process is and what have been some of the rulings that she's done in the past. So as I said, Amy Coney Barrett is a constitutional originalist or a constitutional fundamentalist. Now, what this means is Judge Barrett chooses to look at the Constitution as it was written and intended to be written. A lot of times judges will take this originalist or fundamentalist stance on the Constitution, and they like to wrap it up in this idea that they are a neutral judge. You'll hear them say, and Amy Coney Barrett has said things like this as well, you'll hear originalist judges say, I don't go into a ruling trying to warp the ruling to the policy that I would like to see. I take an objective stance at the law. I choose to look at the law and the rulings that I will pass down as fulfilling the law, not trying to shape public opinion or the laws and the policies that will be adopted by legislators. The idea is I am innocent in this. I am pure in this. As a judge, I am on the high. It is my duty not to shape the course of the country, but to interpret the legality of policies or cases that are brought before me. So to conservatives, that sounds pretty good. Oh, finally, we're going to get a judge or a politician that comes into a seat of power and doesn't try to push their personal agenda or their personal political beliefs on us. So to conservatives or people that are a little less politically educated, that sounds great, you know. But the truth of the matter is there's no such thing as a neutral judge, and I'll explain why that is. There's no such thing as a neutral judge in this country because I want you to think for a minute about who wrote the Constitution and why did they write it the way that they wrote. So who wrote the Constitution? It was a bunch of hyper-wealthy, rich white men who owned slaves. That's who wrote the Constitution. So if you're a constitutional originalist, you are saying that this document that was written on like fucking parchment with a feather by rich old white men who baked into the Constitution, baked into the legal system, their inherent right to private property and superiority over other races and classes of people. So I say that there's no such thing as a neutral judge in this country because even if you're an originalist or an objectivist or a fundamentalist, you're not being neutral. You're saying that these rich white men who were landowners and slaveholders had the right idea about government. And if you believe that, if you're going to make rulings that the laws and perspectives that were put on paper 230 years ago are right, even in the year 2020, that's clearly militant against all the other types of people, all the other groups of people, be it minorities, religious groups, anyone who was not a rich white landowner and is not today. If you are interpreting that document as it was 230 years ago, you are an enemy of those people. That's why I say there's no such thing as a neutral judge. There's no such thing as an objective judge. She is going to be doing the will that the founding fathers envisioned for this country, which is a nation ruled by white men with colored people as slaves. So this constitutional originalist stance that Amy Coney Barrett has isn't the only problem with her. And I'm sure if you guys are on this channel, you have already been watching some of the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett. And one of the things that has come up repeatedly is her Catholic faith. Now, obviously, that's a very divisive issue. You'll have people on one side saying, freedom of religion, and Amy Coney Barrett has come out on her side and said, no, I will not allow my faith to interfere with my rulings. Now, that's an issue because in the past she has said differently, and I actually have an excerpt here for you guys, and I'll pull it up. So this first quote from Amy Coney Barrett came out of her confirmation hearing as an appeal judge in 2017. If you're asking whether I take my faith seriously and I am a faithful Catholic, I am. Although I would stress that my personal church affiliation or my religious belief would not bear in the discharge of my duties as a judge. And this was from a confirmation hearing in 2017 between the Senate Judiciary Committee considering her nomination for the appeals court. There's another quote from Amy Coney Barrett in a 1998 article co-written by Barrett in the Marquette Law Review. She said, Catholic judges are obliged by oath, professional commitment, and the demands of citizenship to enforce the death penalty. They are also to adhere to their church teachings on moral matters. So, which is it? What is her actual opinion, and what sort of rulings is she going to do if she takes the Supreme Court? We have already seen some of the rulings that she has done as a U.S. appeal judge on the Seventh Circuit. With some of her rulings, she reeled back the rights of the incarcerated. She's also had some shady rulings when it comes to the rights of attorney. But I think the biggest issue with her being Catholic that's on everybody's mind is LGBTQ rights and women's reproductive health rights, namely abortion. Now, Judge Barrett has not dealt with a case that directly affected LGBTQ rights or abortion rights. However, we do have some quotes from her that, at least from her perspective, tries to spin it off during the most recent hearing for Supreme Court nomination that she will not be affecting things like on abortion rights like Roe v. Wade or peel back the rights of LGBTQ people to get married. So this first quote from her is from a lecture in 2013. She said, I think it is very unlikely at this point that the court is going to overturn Roe v. Wade. The fundamental element that the woman has a right to choose abortion will probably stand. She goes on to say, I don't think abortion or the right to abortion would change. I think some of the restrictions would change. The question is how much freedom the court is willing to let and having states have in regulating abortion. So that last bit there tells me that no, Roe v. Wade will not get overturned, most likely. It'll stay on the books. What they're going to do is bring forth a case that puts restrictions on abortions, and it'll work its way up to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And in this scenario, if it made it to the Supreme Court, with the way the court is packed now, it's going to get passed through. And what this court case will probably do, what the ruling on this court case will probably do, is castrate or take the teeth out of Roe v. Wade that guarantees abortion as a right to women in all states in the United States. One of the biggest issues that people are worrying about with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett is LGBTQ rights. Now, I do have a quote from her. I believe this one is also from the current hearings in regards to gay marriage, LGBTQ rights. She said, I have no agenda, and I do want to be clear that I have never discriminated on the basis of sexual preference, and I would not discriminate on the basis of sexual preference. This question was proposed to her when she was asked how she would plan on ruling in a case that would limit the right of LGBTQ couples to get married. And this was her response. It's obviously, very legalese, very double speak. There's not a lot there. But one of the reasons why I mean, obviously with her Catholic upbringing and her Catholic faith, a lot of people are worried that she will reel back LGBTQ rights. And I don't think that is a misplaced concern, especially when you consider that she has been affiliated with a Catholic-based religious group known as the People of Praise. Now, the People of Praise run a system of private Catholic schools, sort of like Newman, places like that. Now, this Catholic school group is known as Trinity Schools, and they have taken some pretty clear stances against things like gay marriage. Now, I have a quote actually from Trinity Schools' website regarding, in bold print, marriage and sexuality. It says here, as a part of our commitment to help students establish Christian relationships, we want to provide an environment marked by behavior and speech that are consistent with the teachings of Scripture, Christian tradition, and our own core beliefs. These beliefs are rooted in a particular Christian understanding of marriage and sexuality. We understand marriage to be a legal and committed relationship between a man and a woman, and believe that the only proper place for sexual activity is within the bounds of conjugal love. So not only is this group, anti-gay marriage, they are also prude as hell. No, but in all seriousness, Amy Coney Barrett has ties to the People of Praise, to the Trinity School Group. She has given donations to this group. When we see this Christian group, this Christian school group like this, saying things like marriage should be between a man and a woman, and then we see her flip-flop and go to one side or another when it comes to some of her quotes in the past, saying that, one is, my Christian faith won't get in the way, but then in an article that was co-written by her that's a little more personable, obviously, than a judicial hearing, she says, as Catholic judges, we have a responsibility, presumably to God or whoever the fuck, to make rulings in a Christian matter, that based on Christian morality. I mean, with this video, I'm kind of beating a dead horse, because you've been watching the judicial hearings. You've probably done your own research on this, but I just kind of wanted to compile it all in one place. But it's not just LGBTQ rights that are on the line. It's just not women's reproductive health. Johnny actually just sent me an article, and I just had a moment to kind of run through it quick. I'll try to find the link and put it in the description for you guys to do your own research. But right before I was about to make this video, Johnny sent me this article. Big scoop. Amy Barrett claimed yesterday that she doesn't have a firm view on climate change. And there's actually a quote from that. I'll try to find it for you guys. But her dad was a longtime Shell oil lawyer, and Shell suddenly has a major case before the Supreme Court that Barrett may be serving on. Now, this isn't the only environmental regulation case that I dug up and found that Trump's administration and that Republicans and conservatives and corporations in general are hoping to get Amy Coney Barrett on before there's a ruling on. But right there, what if her dad is the lawyer of a giant Shell corporation, giant oil corporation? We're going to assume that she's going to do reel backs on environmental regulations, or she's going to castrate the agencies that have the cojones to regulate giant polluters. Now, there's actually one case that I found that pretty crystal clearly shows that that's going to be the case, that they are trying to fast track her through these hearings in order to get her on. So right now in the appeals court, there is a case between the Sierra Club and the U.S. Department of Fish and Game. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the legalese and the details of this particular court case, but the gist of it is this. The Sierra Club is suing the U.S. Department of Fish and Game to see what sort of records the department is releasing in regards to the EPA for how corporations are either flouting environmental regulations or hiding their own pollution track record. So in this court case, the big dispute is that the U.S. Department of Fish and Game, or the EPA, does not have to release all their records. They can release, to private nonprofit organizations. The U.S. government doesn't have to release all the records. They can kind of pick and choose what sort of information they want to let out. Just like sort of when you get fucking information from the Pentagon or the U.S. Army or whatever, it's all fucking redacted. Same sort of thing, but with environmental regulators. Now, obviously, this may not sound like as big of a case or as big of a conflict of interest as, her fucking dad being a U.S. shell lawyer, which probably makes sense why she got on the U.S. Court of Appeals in the first place. But still, this is a huge court case that is coming up, I believe, to the Supreme Court on November 2nd. So they're obviously trying to fast track her getting through because it has bigger implications. It's already big enough implications for environmental regulation, but it has bigger implications in general when it comes to U.S. government agency transparency. But this ruling, if conservative judges, which they will, they're in the hand of corporate America, they're in the pocket of corporate America, if they rule against the Sierra Club in this, it's going to make it so that U.S. government agencies, that regulators that are already getting kind of bought up by giant corporations are not going to have to release documents, information about polluters, about giant corporations and their relationship with the EPA. And that's going to spell catastrophe for groups like the Sierra Club that sue government agencies or sue corporations in order to make sure that we have legislation and regulations in place that protect our environment. And that's going to spill over to transparency in general in all government departments, which we already have a serious issue with. So guys, that's about all I have for you on Amy Coney Barrett. If you have any more information you want to share with me, drop it in the comments. I'm not sure how this video turned out. I was kind of jumping all over the place, but the big things I think I've covered, the big things that people are worried about: LGBTQ rights, women's reproductive health, environmental regulations, and her ties to corporate America. We know that her pick is not ideal. We know it's bad news. But I just want to make this video kind of compile everything for you guys. And, it's just a shame that, and to me, RBG was not far enough left at all, but she was really the last bastion we had in the Supreme Court. And, if you look at all the U.S. appeals court picks that Trump's gotten away with and his Supreme Court pick here, they're really stacking the cards against us. This is really serious, because unless somehow in the future we can pack the court with leftist judges, which I don't think is going to happen, any sort of legislation we manage to get through with just say in a beautiful world, a fucking communist, socialist, progressive majority Congress, majority Senate, president, if we don't have these judge seats, we're really fucked. Doesn't matter if we pass a Green New Deal or Medicare for all, these sort of things. If you have conservative, right-wing, Christian wackos in the U.S. Court of Appeals, in the Supreme Court, they're going to strike it all down. This is the sort of issue that FDR had when he had his alphabet soup programs. And this is bad news, guys. I don't really have much more of an analysis than that. I think it's clear as hell. It spells certain doom for the rights of LGBTQ people and the rights of women in this country, as if they weren't already under assault enough. I don't know that this will be the final nail in the coffin, but it's definitely one more. So I don't know, guys. If I get some more information on this, I'll drop that information, have a discussion with Johnny in the podcast this week, which we're shooting today. So thanks for listening. I'm sorry for rambling, but as always, this is the Thinking Out Loud show, and I love you all, and I'll see you next week. Bye.